Thanks so much, Edward. And I see a couple of familiar faces, so hi. um, I don't have slides, but I'd like to describe what I plan to do. And I will also very much take the philosophy of choose your own adventure. I have before done a seminar on lead exposure. And in that seminar, students not only did curricula around science. So we had a curriculum that was a high school chemistry curricula, but there was a political science one looking at the engaging with the media around environmental topics and misinformation and how communication happens and how to gauge communication. And then there was a biostatistician who actually used the very data-driven material that was that we talked about in the class with health statistics and with statistics around lead in soil and lead in water and lead in bodily fluids, and use that in biostatistics content. And then we had several elementary school students who took the content and actually used it in earth science kind of conversations around water and around soil. So I loved that idea and really think that it fits with my general philosophy. As an environmental and occupational health physician, I do think about health, but I think my specialty is really one of public health. And I think it's important to consider the implications of science as it relates to people, and also how people can then shape their environments. How can you mitigate environmental exposures yourself for yourself and your family? But how also can you engage with the decision makers at the city council level, the decision makers at the Department of Environmental Protection in the state of Pennsylvania, and also at the federal agencies. And I weave this kind of universality, if you will, throughout the topics that we talk about, because I think that everyone should not only know how to engage with decision makers, but also feel that they have a personal civic responsibility to do so. And so without being an advocate or there'll be no posters or protesting in my class. On the other hand, we will talk frequently about the science material that will be very useful to create persuasive arguments for your students. And so I've chosen 4 very important environmental health topics. There are many others, but I've decided that in our curriculum of about 12 to 13 classes, we'll have 3 classes each of these 4 topics. And I would hope that some of you may want to come to every single class and then create curricula that really would be broad and maybe include all the topics. Some may say, well, I really am interested in one of these topics, and I would, just for context, ask you to not only attend those 3, but also at least one other, grouping of 3 classes. And then we would work individually to go more in depth. For instance, if you wanted to just create your curricula on one of the 4 topics. And so I would put you in touch with people from the Department of Environmental Protection, perhaps local scientists who may be able to offer different perspectives. We would get involved in more materials that would be useful to you for your distinct purposes. So it's not that you would not put in the time, if you will, but perhaps it would be less structured. Perhaps you would attend just some of the classes, and then the rest of the time we would work one-on-one at a time that was more convenient for you, if the structure and timing of the class is a challenge, for instance, to really come every single time for that particular time frame. So what topics have I chosen? I think some of the most important ones for the United States and for our Philadelphia region are air pollution. And in air pollution, I mean both indoor and outdoor air pollution. What are the sources? What can we control ourselves? How can we measure it? I have access to some air monitors that you might use in your classrooms, or that we might go out into the neighborhood and use. There are materials online, such as the Air Quality Index. How should that be used? How should people know about it and apply it to their everyday life? The next topic, and also what are some of the regulations that are really in play in terms of protecting us in terms of air quality, and are they good enough? How should they be evaluated, and where should we actually think about making them better or more protective of human health? The next topic is water pollution. Now, water quality is really very complicated because it includes both drinking water quality, and you've probably heard some concerns having to do with lead service lines, and we'll certainly include all of that. But there are also some other problems having to do with our infrastructure of water treatment plants and how we clean the water as it leaves our homes before it returns to our rivers and streams, and what are those implications for the ecology in rivers and streams and watersheds, and how should we really be thinking about our impact on these bodies of water for their future sustainability for our health and for the future sustainability really of the world around us, both the animals and plant life around us. I also think it's very important for people to understand the water cycle, because I will tell you that even through medical school, I didn't understand it. It was only after that I really learned how everything was in this cycle. This was not, common knowledge to a smart person with a good educational background. And so my best guess is that many people don't know about it. And so I think it's in order to really expect people to protect it and understand how to engage with water in our environments, I think it is very important to understand that cycle. So that will be part of what we discuss. We also have some capabilities in our Center of Excellence in Environmental Toxicology to do some water testing. We can test specimens for lead. We can test a few other things. And so there may be experiments that you can design that would incorporate some of the background kind of testing that we have available. Speaking of lead, lead is the third of the four topics that we'll be talking about. Many of you may know that lead is ubiquitous in our environment for lots of reasons. It is still largely in our housing. We have, especially in Philadelphia, over 90% of the housing still contains lead paint. And if that lead paint is in great condition, it probably doesn't pose a large hazard. But you may also know that Philadelphia has a large number of people living in poverty. And when you're living in poverty, you spend your money on food and childcare and not on renovating your peeling lead paint in your home. And so there are lots of situations that are truly dangerous for young children in their homes. Many of you may be well aware of some of the dangerous conditions in your schools. I hope you all are using your PFT app where you're actually reporting some of those dangerous conditions in your schools so that they can be remediated. And so we'll, of course, be talking about that as well, having to do with lead in particular, but of course, asbestos and other things as well in schools. We do a lot of lead soil testing. We have a map of over 3,000 lead soil tests that is available online, and we can help you to use that to help students engage around lead in the environment. How did it get in the soil? Well, in part, it got in the soil because of the lead paint chips from homes. But you will recall that we used to have lead in our gasoline and industrial processes. And so lead, although it's a natural part of our crust, it has been concentrated in the upper levels of the soil as a result of that fallout, if you will, from air pollution from gasoline and other sources. So we'll talk about that in a lot of detail, and you'll have the opportunity to do some soil lead testing, and we could, again, design experiments around that for your class. The fourth topic that I would like to talk about actually incorporates several of the other ones. It's climate change. Climate change from the perspective of human health. You may have talked about climate change in your classes or heard about it with respect to sustainability, and that's really very important. But how does it impact human health, and how is it impacting human health here in Philadelphia? You may recall that Eastwick, one of the neighborhoods in Philadelphia, was underwater I forget now how many months ago, but not within the past year. An entire neighborhood underwater, in part due to climate changes and increased rain and confluence of runoff from upstream on the Darby Creek, meeting the tidal influences from the Delaware and the Schuylkill, and then having some consequences of lots of impervious ground in the Eastwick neighborhood, so that the water then runs into these waterways and overflows the banks. So that's just one very local example of climate change and how it's impacting Philadelphians. But what about heat islands? There are heat islands in Philadelphia where the temperatures can be 10 to 20 degrees higher than we may find in more tree-covered neighborhoods. And these are really important implications to talk about. So we will talk about climate change in all of its health impacts. And the reason I said it overlaps with water quality and air quality is that we expect there to be increase in air pollution, in part due to elevated temperatures, and in part due to greater need for energy. And energy is a very important source of air pollution for our Philadelphia region. We will also see impacts to water with increased rain in our region. And so we'll talk about the health impacts of runoff into our water ways with microbial contamination, as well as nutrients into our waterways that may lead to harmful algal blooms and all kinds of other issues. These are just to name a few. So the flexibility of this course will be in terms of how you'd like to do your curriculum. It could be involving all four of those areas. It could be involving one or two. It can take a political science bent. It can be a pure science. It can be a policy. I will tell you that we will infuse environmental justice and structural racism in every aspect of these four areas. Environmental justice is a core research area of mine, and I really care about it and feel that it is very important for people to understand as they engage with policymakers and decision makers around improving environmental health. I think that's all that I have to say in terms of comments. I'd be happy to hear any questions or that you all have.